Our story begins on Coruscant as the Jedi Council was in session to discuss the recent promotion of Anakin Skywalker, directed by Chancellor Palpatine. The Chancellor has made young Skywalker his personal representative on the Jedi Council, bypassing the Council itself to give Anakin a seat and, in Anakin's mind, the rank of Master. It was a bittersweet moment for Anakin, as he'd always dreamed of getting the honor of being a Council Master, and he certainly needed the rank so he could get access to the restricted archives, find a way to save Padme, but he still sort of wished that promotion came from the Council instead of the Chancellor. Anakin always sought out some validation from the Council, as the first time he ever met them, he was rejected immediately. He wanted them to admit they were wrong about him, but today, they were forced to put Anakin on the Council, and in order to keep holding him back, Mace Windu told Skywalker that he is not granted the rank of Master. Anakin's mind was buzzing with anger, confusion, jealousy, betrayal, and he let some of that out, as Windu eventually had to forcefully tell Anakin to take a seat. And as the meeting continued, Anakin could not help but wonder why even allow him on the Council. If they were going to deny him mastery, why not deny him this role as well? And Anakin recalled what he was doing in this position anyways. He was expected to report back everything the Council says to Palpatine. And Anakin realized the Jedi were going to use him for the same thing, only to report on Palpatine instead. Anakin's head was spinning as he was stuck in this political game between Jedi and politicians. He couldn't take it. He was going to explode from the pressure and the pain of all of it. Being on this planet felt like being on Geonosis or Umbara during wartime. He needed a way out to clear his mind of everything. So, when the Battle of Kashyyyk was brought up, Anakin quickly jumped in and he said he will take his 501st Men to help out the Wookiees. The council members looked around with a bit of caution and concern, and Obi-Wan spoke up, saying they may have a different mission for Anakin. And Anakin jumped in to say he will not be doing their dirty work, he will not spy on Palpatine. That is what they want from him, right? The counselors looked to each other, and then Windu shrugged and shook his head, partly realizing all of this could be easier if Anakin was just gone. He was clearly a shatterpoint in all of this, and taking him away from any plans of the Sith could help. So he looked to Yoda, and the Grandmaster nodded his approval, and Anakin would be assigned the mission to help the Wookiees. Time would fly by for preparation of the mission, as Anakin was helping his men load up the ship, when Appo alerted him that he had visitors. Anakin stepped away from the Venator, finding Padme and Obi-Wan waiting for him together. Padme gave him a soft smile, and didn't necessarily try to hide anything from Obi-Wan, as she said she doesn't want him to leave again. Anakin told her that being here is ripping him apart. The Council and the Chancellor both want to use him to further their own agendas, and he's not sure where his loyalties lie. Politics are not where he's at his best. His best is in battle, helping people. Padme sighed, telling Anakin she knows, and she just told him to promise he will come back again. Anakin chuckled and said that he always does, and the two of them said a true goodbye, as Obi-Wan awkwardly waited. When he was finally alone with Anakin, he told his former Padawan that he was happy he made this choice. Anakin tilted his head, then asked if the Council wanted him to tell Anakin that he had to spy on Palpatine. Obi-Wan nodded slowly, then looked to the sky, and said that sometimes he wished that more of his master's defiance of the Council had rubbed off on him. Anakin laughed and said that makes two of them. He said goodbye to his old friend, and perhaps when they see each other again, this will all be over. As he left, Anakin turned, and he told Obi-Wan that if anything happens, just please make sure Padme is alright. And Obi-Wan promised he will keep her safe. When the Venator jumped to hyperspace, Anakin felt alone, but still content. He didn't tell Palpatine he was leaving, and he was sure Palpatine would be very disappointed, but Anakin had to do what was best for him, or things could go very wrong. The darkness that lived within Anakin's heart was begging to be let out more than ever, and Anakin had a feeling that being on Coruscant would not have helped him any longer. So he moved to the communications room, and Anakin would get an update on Ahsoka's campaign on Mandalore, and then Appo and a few others would fill Anakin in on the battle plans for Kashyyyk. Back on Coruscant, Masters Yoda and Windu would personally go to Palpatine's office, informing him that they've sent Anakin off-world per his own request. Palpatine raised an eyebrow, and he said he would have thought Skywalker would have been excited to be on the Council, unless the Jedi did something to upset him. When neither Jedi responded, Palpatine asked if they denied him mastery. Windu was beyond annoyed with Palpatine by this point in the war, and he told Palpatine now that the Council decides who deserves a seat and the rank of Master, not the Chancellor and not the Senate. Palpatine gave a kind smile with no light behind his eyes, and he said that Skywalker was the one who killed Dooku and rescued him, was he not? That mission alone should give him the new rank. And now Yoda spoke up, asking how exactly Anakin did manage to kill Dooku. And Palpatine, with his chair now turned to face the window, said that Anakin displayed strength and power beyond anything he'd ever seen before. It was truly to be admired, and he can only pray the Jedi and the Republic can win this war with him off-world. The Jedi were dismissed, and Palpatine felt his frustrations grow. Anakin was still too mentally weak to handle what was to come. So be it. And on Kashyyyk, Anakin would become familiar with the Wookiee leaders, and he spoke with Jedi Masters Luminara Unduli and Quinlan Vos, who were also stationed here. He also learned that Padawan Gungi, the Wookiee, was here with Luminara to enter this battle. The droid forces were gathered on the other side of the water, and they would be attacking soon. So Anakin learned everything he needed to know, and soon prepared for battle. And on Coruscant, the Jedi Council had regathered after many long hours, as they finally had the location of General Grievous. He was on Utapau, and the Jedi were getting impatient, with both the war coming to a slow end, and still no real sign of Darth Sidious. The Council wanted to draw him out, and they thought that it would be extremely difficult, with both Windu and Yoda still on Coruscant. Initially, that was the main reason that Yoda was going to volunteer to go to Kashyyyk, but with Anakin there instead, Yoda would offer to go to Utapau. The Council was largely in agreement that this was the right idea, and Obi-Wan agreed as well, as he wanted to keep his promise to Anakin and protect Padme should anything go wrong here on Coruscant. So Yoda would soon prepare and take off to Utapau with Gree and his men. And while Yoda flew through hyperspace, the Battle of Kashyyyk was in full force. The Kashyyyk beaches had turned to chaos as waves of separatist forces advanced through the murky waters. Tanks were rolling forward, cannons were blasting the Wookiee jungles with explosive fire. B-1 and B-2 super battle droids waded through the shallows, weapons raised to fire. The sky was illuminated by the glow of this blaster fire streaking across the battlefield. Wookiee warriors swung down from the trees, flying around in their small ships to pick off as many droids as they could from the water. The dense foliage trembled as the droids unleashed a relentless barrage, cutting down trees and scorching the earth. Gunships rose overhead, dropping reinforcements from the 501st Legion into the fight. Their blue-marked armor was barely visible through the smoke and the fire. At the front of the Wookiee charge from the beach, Anakin Skywalker ran with his lightsaber ignited. Blue glow was cutting through the mess of the battle. As the Wookiees unleashed their war cries, he surged forward with them, deflecting incoming fire, cutting through the advancing droids, trying to get out of the water. The ground shook as the Wookiees tore through the enemy ranks, ripping apart droids with their bare hands, launching grenades into the clustered formations. Anakin moved like a storm. Movements were fluid, precise. He slashed through super battle droids, and he was leading the charge deeper into enemy lines. Explosions were sending debris and droids flying, while the swampy terrain was littered with scrap metal and bodies. The clones, commanded by Oppo, held the perimeter. Their blasters were hammering into the advancing droids as their AT-RT walkers moved past them, stomping through the underbrush, cannons spewing fire at enemy spider droids, and tanks were pushing towards the shore. The guttural roars of Wookiee warriors were clashing with the cold, mechanical sounds of the advancing droids, and Anakin felt at home in the chaos. Across the galaxy, Grandmaster Yoda confronted General Grievous on Utapau, and the General welcomed the challenge. Yoda flew at him, and Grievous spun his 4 blades to knock Yoda away. Yoda used the Force to throw machinery at Grievous, and Grievous used his mechanical body to dodge, moving back at the Green Jedi, the two of them clashing their blades together until Yoda forced Grievous to run away as a chase through the planets would get underway. The galaxy was at war, but the Separatists were on the run, and once Commander Gree saw Yoda fighting Grievous, he contacted the Jedi Temple to alert them that Grievous is on the run and will soon be taken care of. In the temple, Windu, Obi-Wan, Kit Fisto, Shakti, and Agen Kolar looked to each other, and Windu said that it's time Palpatine give up his emergency powers. He has stayed in office for far too long, and now that Grievous is going to be defeated, he must give up his powers, return to democracy, or he must be removed from office. Obi-Wan said this will be seen as treason, and Windu snapped that he's not afraid of these words. He must do what is right for the Republic, for democracy. Obi-Wan nodded his understanding, and Windu told Kenobi and Shaak Ti to stay and make sure the temple is kept safe while he, Fisto, Kolar, and Tin will go and speak to Palpatine. And so, the 4 Jedi would fly through the Coruscant night, with none of them saying a word. At this point, none of them knew that Palpatine was a Sith, so they suspected Sidious was close to Palpatine, and so they remained cautious as they entered his office and calmly asked to speak with him. Palpatine had the 4 Jedi sit in front of his desk, and then he asked what he can do for them. The Jedi sat, and Windu told Palpatine that it's time he give up his emergency powers and resign from his role as Chancellor. The war must end. Palpatine's face seemed to age right in front of the Jedi as he sighed, then slowly stood up, grabbing a bottle of wine, and began pouring a glass for him and the Jedi. He told them that it is up to the Senate. If they vote to remove him from office, then he will oblige. But Windu said in an icy tone that they cannot allow this. Palpatine controls the Senate. So Palpatine just dryly asked Windu what he plans to do. Arrest him? And the 4 Jedi stood up, and Windu said they will do what they must for this democracy. And not a second later, Saesee Tin's throat began to gurgle as he fell to the floor, dead, with the shattered wine bottle having pierced his throat. And like a phantom, Darth Sidious suddenly flew to the door, locking it behind him, and yelling out, "Help! Help! Security! This is murder!" And he smiled as a red blade ignited from his open hand. Aegon Kolar took a glance down to Saesee Tin, and Sidious shot lightning into his chest, shooting the Jedi out of the window to his death, as both Windu and Fisto could only watch. Windu pointed his blade at him, saying it's always been him. He turned to Kit Fisto, saying they will take him together, but Fisto's blade suddenly dipped, and a smear of red flashing darkness flew from behind a statue by the desk. Fisto's head bounced as it hit the floor, as the headless corpse collapsed, leaving just Windu and Sidious here, as Sidious pulled out both blades. Skywalker was not here to save him if he fails, so he simply will not fail. And the greatest duel of the century would commence, Jedi versus Sith. But this time, Mace Windu would not win. He was not prepared for this huge revelation, and Sidious was embracing his full power with nothing to lose. He didn't have to balance bringing Anakin to his side, so he let loose, and before long, Mace Windu would join the corpses here, as Sidious would stab both blades into Windu to end this. And as Windu lay on the floor, the last thing he saw was Sidious turning on his communicator to speak with the Grand Army he controlled, and he gave them new orders. Execute Order 66. On Megiddo, Felucia, Cato Nemoidia, dozens of Republic Venators, countless more planets, the light of the Jedi was quickly extinguished by the clones they all fought beside every single day for these years. The clones turned without hesitation, and on Utapau, as Yoda turned Grievous into spare parts, 6 Republic gunships surrounded his location and fired missiles and turrets at the Jedi. Yoda defended himself well, taking down 4 of them, but ultimately, the blaster fire hit him hard, and the platform exploded into the ground far below, leaving Yoda among the thousands of dead Jedi. On Kashyyyk, Anakin was aboard a Wookiee fluttercraft as he and a squad of Wookiees were taking out droid tanks when the new orders came in. The fluttercraft was suddenly hit with a Republic missile, and it descended down into the forests, crashing hard into the trees, in a crash that no one should have survived. And in the Jedi Temple, Obi-Wan was fighting off waves of clones pouring through the temple. He turned to order Shaak Ti to get the younglings out of here, but Master T had already fallen dead. A blaster ball hit Obi-Wan in the shoulder, and he was forced to run further in, and the clones, led by Commander Cody, just kept on coming through. The temple would become a massacre, as any successful Jedi defense was uprooted by the Grand Inquisitor, posing as a loyal temple guard, turning to slaughter Jedi defenses. Obi-Wan would find a group of younglings running across the top hallway, and he guided them out to a balcony, where Bail Organa was waiting with the speeder. The younglings got on, and Obi-Wan told Bail to leave. He will cover them. Bail took off, as Obi-Wan turned to see his 212th troopers firing at him. He took out 5 of them, but a detonator threw Kenobi hard to the ground. He looked up through the smoke to see Cody looking down at him with his blaster raised. Obi-Wan tried to speak to him, and for a split second, Cody hesitated. But then he raised his blaster and he fired. Obi-Wan used that split second to roll off the balcony. Cody's shot was searing his back, and Obi-Wan fell through the air, using the Force to guide him, as he eventually would land in a speeder, and was dropped off to the ground. Obi-Wan groaned in pain, as he looked up at the temple. Fire and smoke were erupting like a volcano, and Obi-Wan put his hood up and he ran through the streets. None of this made any sense, but he was running now to save Padme. He had a promise to keep, and he could only hope that Anakin was still alive. On Kashyyyk, Anakin Skywalker woke up in a destroyed Wookiee ship stuck inside of the huge trees. Fires were spreading around, the smoke was thick as Anakin struggled to breathe, and as Anakin was trying to escape, the brush began to clear and he was pulled to the ground. Anakin fell, then looked up to see the younger Wookiee holding a green lightsaber, trembling in fear. It was Gungi. He was here with Luminara for the battle, but he just watched Luminara be taken in by the clones, and he was alone when he found Skywalker in the trees. Anakin took a moment to think, and quickly understood what was going on. Fives, Rex, the inhibitor chips, it was never a virus. The clones were right, and the Jedi had failed to see the truth. Anakin tried feeling into the Force to find Yoda, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, anyone, but the Force was surrounded in darkness, and he soon heard a squad of clones moving through the trees, saying that they must confirm Anakin's death. Anakin was about to run at them, but he now realized a piece of the ship had pierced deep into his thigh, and he could barely walk at all. So Gungi put Anakin's arm over his shoulder, and the two of them limped away together. In the trees, Appo and his best allies would emerge to find the destroyed Wookiee ship along with the dead Wookiees, but they didn't find Anakin anywhere. After a bit, Appo would contact Lord Sidious and inform him that Anakin was missing, but they will put everything they have into finding him. Sidious heard this all the way from Coruscant, and a tinge of fear even rose up in him. He needed Skywalker dead. He told Appo to kill him, or his failure will be remembered, and he ended the message, as Sidious knew he needed leverage on Skywalker if he were truly still alive, and so he took Fox and others in the Coruscant Guard to his shuttle, as they took off to Padme's apartment. Across Coruscant, Obi-Wan Kenobi snuck into Padme's home as she was looking at the Jedi Temple with a great sadness. When she saw Obi-Wan injured but alive, she hugged him with great relief, and she asked about Anakin. Obi-Wan said he wasn't sure about any other Jedi. The clones turned on the temple, and he assumed that it happened everywhere. Obi-Wan held Padme as she cried, and Obi-Wan assured her that Anakin was the strongest of all of them. He had to be alive, but the two of them must now leave together. Padme nodded, and they began hurrying out with C-3PO and R2-D2 to Obi-Wan's speeder. But it was suddenly blown out of the air, as the balcony to the apartment was hit with explosions. Obi-Wan and Padme were thrown backwards as the Chancellor's shuttle landed amidst the fires. Obi-Wan struggled to his feet, and he ignited his lightsaber as the shuttle doors opened to reveal Sidious and the Guard members. Sidious laughed, saying he has wanted to do this for a long time, and he lifted up his hands. But Obi-Wan noticed something on the floor nearby. The word "Run" was written out in a blue spray, and Obi-Wan looked out, suddenly seeing R2-D2 flying through the air, holding up a thermal detonator. The little droid was sacrificing himself, and Sidious noticed Obi-Wan looking away, so he turned, seeing R2 fly right into the engines of the shuttle and set off the detonator. The explosion instantly killed all of the clones here, and Sidious was thrown hard against the wall, fires from the explosion covering him as he yelled in agonized pain. The explosion spread so quickly at Obi-Wan and Padme, as Obi-Wan could only hold up both hands, holding the fires back. The heat was scorching him as he turned his head just enough to tell Padme to get out of here, take the back elevator. Padme told Obi-Wan she can't leave him, more tears falling down her face, but Obi-Wan was being pushed back, the explosion fires growing stronger, and so he turned, using one hand to push Padme into the apartment as she flew backwards, and she watched the fires consume Kenobi. She had no choice other than to get into the elevator with 3PO, but as she did, she learned it was disabled from the bottom and could only go down with an emergency manual override from the office by the balcony that was already consumed in the fires. Padme had lost all hope, but C-3PO told her to stay here, and he waddled out of the elevator. 3PO just lost R2, and the droid understood now what sadness truly felt like, and now was his turn. He told Padme to thank Anakin for making him. He has lived a wonderful life, and 3PO disappeared into the fires, finding the override panel, and he pulled it down just as the fires melted his circuits, and he, too, was destroyed in all of it. Padme fell to the floor as the elevator began descending to the ground, and she didn't know what to do, but at least Palpatine was dead. But as Padme left the elevator at the streets, she saw clone troopers nearby getting onto a shuttle with an emergency medical capsule. One of them yelled that Palpatine is still barely alive, but Padme now didn't waste a second. She ran into the streets to blend in. Palpatine and the clones would be hunting her. She had to get out of here. She didn't know who to trust, so she just ran into the underworld and she hid, waiting for the streets to be more calm so she could finally get off-world. Around 24 hours later, Anakin Skywalker and the Wookiee Gungi flew into Coruscant on a stolen Republic ship, and Anakin flew down to find Padme, hopefully still safe in her apartment. But Anakin would soon have his heart broken once more as he flew down and entered discreetly through the window, limping to find the apartment completely destroyed from the flames and explosions. Fire and rescue teams had already been through here, and was all just charred and destroyed. Anakin would fall to his knees in complete despair as he found one of 3PO's hands. He found the top of R2-D2. He found the lightsaber of Kenobi. And to top it all off, Anakin found the necklace that he once gave to Padme. Anakin was left alone with the revelation that R2, 3PO, Obi-Wan, and Padme all seemingly died here. And Anakin vowed to destroy whoever did this, and he eventually would stand up and go to find his ship, where Gungi was still waiting. The little Wookiee Jedi had hope in his eyes, more hope than Anakin could feel in the entire galaxy, and Gungi told Anakin in his Wookiee voice that they can fix this together. Anakin felt hopeless, but with a desire to avenge his friends, and he told Gungi he needs to do this alone. The Wookiee's eyes went sad, and Anakin said he was sorry, but everyone who gets close to him seemed to die off, so he told Gungi to leave. Anakin watched him go, and he decided he must return to the temple. The communications room will reveal who did this, and he will destroy them. Elsewhere in Coruscant, Darth Sidious was laying on a medical table, his body burned, heavily damaged from the exploded shuttle, and he was alive enough to guide the clones to the medical facility where he had parts to rebuild himself, or someone else if need be, if he were ever injured this terribly. The medical droids worked for many long hours to rebuild Sidious, putting his immobile limbs into a suit where he would be allowed to walk once more, and when it was done, Sidious rose on the table in a breathing helmet, and he vowed that this will not set him back. He will rule the galaxy. No one will stop him. As Anakin Skywalker was working his way through the broken down temple gates to try and get to the bottom of everything, his life had been completely turned upside down as the entire Jedi Order was just wiped out by the clone army. Luckily, the clones seemed to be gone from the temple, aside from a handful of security troopers that Anakin had no trouble moving past. He would not allow himself to think of Obi-Wan, Padme, the droids. Aside from losing everyone in the Order, he lost his best friend, his wife with their child, and if Anakin let himself think about it too much, it would destroy him. He now was walking through the temple, and the fires had at least died down to be nothing more than just smoke, as Anakin tried not looking at all of the slain bodies littering the floor. They were countless, and they were of all ages, but Anakin just pushed forward, soon entering the temple communications room, and hoping that the last messages were not erased from the council, so Anakin could figure out why all of this had happened. Once Anakin did get to the security console, he flicked it on, but quickly found that it had been erased very recently. Anakin slammed his fist angrily into the console, but then it began to beep, alerting Anakin to an emergency broadcast from the Republic HoloNet. Anakin clicked on the button, and his heart dropped once more, as he saw exactly what was happening. Chancellor Palpatine was in the middle of the Senate, but it wasn't truly him. The top of his mask was removed, but as Anakin looked into the HoloNet, he saw Palpatine in some sort of mechanical suit, describing the attack on his life by the Jedi Council, and he went over how the loyal clone army saved him just in time, but he of course has been scarred, deformed, and has been placed in this suit to preserve his life. He said the entire Jedi Order had to be taken care of, so that this terrible war could finally come to an end. Darth Sidious was just terribly injured in the explosion at Padme's apartment, and he was repaired and put into the suit to keep him alive, and now was declaring himself Emperor. Anakin watched it all happen, and the pieces began to fall into place. The warnings from the Council, the mission to spy on Palpatine, all of it made sense. Palpatine is Sidious. Anakin felt angry, confused, betrayed, but as he was processing everything, a voice spoke from the entrance to the room, telling Anakin that all of this was supposed to belong to him. This empire could have been his. Anakin ignited his blade and pointed it forward to see that this was a temple guard. So Anakin asked what he was doing here. What happened here at the temple? And the guard said it was simple. The clones took care of the traitorous Jedi. And Anakin quickly yelled out that there were children here, innocent children. The Grand Inquisitor shrugged, saying that he did what was best for the coming empire, and he ignited his own lightsaber, telling Anakin that he cannot let him walk out of here. He deserves to be Sidious's next apprentice, not Anakin Skywalker, and if he can kill Anakin, Sidious will truly train him. Anakin spun his blade around in his hand, and he liked this feeling. He allowed himself to smile a bit, telling the temple guard he had made a great mistake confronting him, and he would be wise to stand down. The Inquisitor ignited the other side of his blade, and he angrily ran forward, slamming his saber into Anakin with rapid speed. Elsewhere on Coruscant, Padme Amidala was running through the underworld, and around every corner there were clone troopers searching for Jedi that had escaped the temple. And there was more than one occasion where Padme saw clones shoot down young Jedi trying to get out of here. All of the spaceports were being heavily monitored, and Padme felt like she was going in circles as she too was being hunted. She was looking for a way out of here. After a while, she turned a corner and ran right into a commander and 3 of his men. It was Commander Fox, and he almost immediately recognized her, holding up his blaster and telling Padme she was under arrest. Padme pretended to surrender, then quickly pulled out her blaster and shot 2 of the clones. Fox set his blaster to stun, firing at Padme, and Padme held up her hands, but the blasts never hit her. She soon opened her eyes to see the young Wookiee Jedi standing in front of her, blocking the shots from Fox, and Padme was able to fire, taking out the final clone troopers with the help of the Jedi Gungi. Padme and Gungi got into a hidden warehouse, and she thanked him for his help. Gungi roared quietly, saying he is being hunted, and Padme said that she knows and is sorry, and then she asked if he came from the Jedi Temple. Gungi shook his head, and he told Padme exactly how he got here, and Gungi had no idea just how meaningful this conversation would be. Padme just learned that not only was Anakin still alive, but he was here on Coruscant. She told Gungi they have to find him, and Gungi said Anakin didn't want him around anymore. Padme tried smiling, saying that Anakin has a weird way of connecting with people. He pushes them away because he's afraid of losing them, and they must find him together. Gungi nodded, and the 2 of them would begin sneaking through Coruscant together, as Gungi said he knew where Anakin was going. Back inside of the Jedi Temple, Anakin Skywalker went flying through an entire row of archive holocrons. He scrambled back to his feet, spinning away as the Inquisitor cut through where Anakin just was. He brushed his hair away, holding out his hands to say sort of, "Bring it on," as the Inquisitor came back at him. And this time, Anakin dodged the strike, kicked him in the back, and at first, the Inquisitor had fought with true strength. Movements were sharp and efficient, but as this fight was dragging on, something darker began to bleed into his technique. His footwork was much more aggressive, strikes were heavier, and Anakin would let the fight stretch out, feeling the growing fear in his opponent as he began to overpower him. The Inquisitor fought well for a good while, but could do little more than defend against the fury of Anakin. He spun around his double-bladed lightsaber in a desperate attempt to regain any sort of control here, but Anakin finally just swatted it aside with a brutal downward strike. When the Grand Inquisitor tried to lunge forward once more, Anakin sidestepped, delivering a vicious punch to his ribs, sending him crashing, crumbling into the remains of a temple pillar. Anakin moved forward, and he now held his blade to the Inquisitor's face, telling him it is over. But the Inquisitor was never going to surrender, not with this opportunity right in front of him. He had to kill Anakin. He began using the Force, pulling down debris from the walls, but Anakin spun his blade to cut off his head once and for all, and the debris fell safely to the floor as it was over. Anakin felt his power, and he would leave the temple, knowing now who his true enemy was. Darth Sidious, now Emperor Palpatine. He did this to the galaxy, and he must be destroyed. But as Anakin exited the temple and looked to his ship, there were now 2 people right next to it. Gungi had known that Anakin was going back to the temple, so he took Padme here to find him. And as Padme saw Anakin, she took off running towards him. and Anakin truly couldn't believe his eyes. When he was in her apartment, he could have sworn she was gone, but Anakin began to remember. He only found the necklace. There was no sign of her. So he embraced it, and he began running at her. The two of them would hold each other for a long time, and they wished it could have been forever. But unfortunately, clone gunships would begin flying through the sky towards the temple. Their lights were shining down, looking for any Jedi stragglers. Anakin, Gungi, and Padme would get into their ship and take off just in time. Anakin would ask Padme how she and the baby were doing, and Padme would tell Anakin they need to get somewhere off-world so she can have the child, and they need to do it soon. Coruscant is probably the safest place in the galaxy to have a child, especially for her in her Senate position, but she of course is being hunted, so they need to get somewhere else. Anakin understood, and they would begin considering different ideas. And as they flew around, Anakin also assured Gungi that he was glad that he came back with Padme, as he will help him in his Jedi training from here on out. Gungi loved to hear this. He of course admired Anakin, just like any young Jedi did in the Order, so finding him was about the best possible scenario, considering everything that had gone down. Across Coruscant, Darth Sidious had returned to the medical center, where he was just put together not long ago, and he was being lowered into a Bacta tank, as his wounds were trying to heal. And as Sidious was in here, contemplating what his life would be like from here on out, Commander Cody entered, and he reported that the Grand Inquisitor has been found dead in the temple, and the security footage shows it to be Anakin Skywalker. Sidious cursed to himself, and he closed his eyes for a long moment, and then he ordered that Cody spread out security across Coruscant, begin tracking everyone close to Anakin and Padme, all known senators, any remaining Jedi friends, anyone who has been in contact with them in recent years must be tracked if they decide to leave the planet. Cody nodded, thinking of everyone the clones could follow, and he left to begin spreading out the security. Padme and Anakin would eventually decide to go find Bail Organa, as he had a ship that could get them anywhere they needed to go. So, when they found Bail and told them Padme needs to get to a hospital anywhere else in the galaxy, Bail knew just the place. Luckily, he was about to take off back to Alderaan as well, so this was a good excuse. He could just load them in the ship, and he should be alright. They were going to go to Polis Massa, as they had many allies on the asteroid, to himself, along with the Jedi Order. So of course he offered to bring them there, and it wouldn't be long until they took off. But as Sidious requested, a tracker would have been placed on this ship, and it would most certainly be followed to wherever the ship was going. Once they were on Polis Massa, Padme was brought into a room to be looked at by the droid doctors, and Anakin would actually take Gungi into a nearby room mostly empty, in order to begin teaching him about the Force. When Ahsoka left the Order, Anakin didn't think he'd ever take another Padawan. He needed to finish Ahsoka's training first. But as things stood now, the Order was gone. He didn't think Ahsoka was even alive anymore, and Gungi would be next in line in a long list of young Jedi that could potentially help bring back the Order someday. Anakin wondered if perhaps he could be the upcoming Grand Master, so he decided he would help Gungi and any other Jedi that he eventually finds. Anakin would sit with the young Wookiee, and together, the two of them worked to feel the Force around them, as Anakin helped Gungi to find the light in a galaxy filled with darkness. They sat here together for a very long time, until Gungi opened his eyes and began telling Anakin that he feels something else in the Force, something new. A darkness is approaching. Anakin's eyes suddenly jolted open, as he too felt it, and the two of them would run to the window, right as an Imperial ship emerged from hyperspace and began descending down into the asteroid planet. Anakin said they must have been followed, and he began running to the door as he told Gungi to stay in here, protect Padme. He will handle Darth Sidious. And Anakin would walk to the main door, protected by a ray shield, because the outside was just space. So Anakin put on a space helmet, space suit, and he walked outside, where Sidious was standing in this new metal suit, his breathing echoing through the entire area. And Sidious told Anakin that they could have shared this future together as the most powerful Sith duo in the galaxy. But instead, perhaps his child will serve him as his next apprentice in the dark side. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, telling Sidious that will never happen. He will die here. He will pay for all of the Jedi he killed. Sidious ignited his saber as well, and he smiled under the new mask. he was going to enjoy this. And the silence of the void of space outside the facility was now only broken by the sudden clash of the lightsabers. Skywalker and Sidious moved as quickly as they could in the low gravity of Polis Massa, the planetoid floating amongst an asteroid field, movements both graceful, erratic, dictated by the unnatural physics of their battleground. Anakin was still getting used to this spacesuit, and he pushed off the jagged surface of a group of nearby rocks, using his momentum to twist through the air, bringing his glowing blue blade crashing down. Sidious, of course, still getting used to his suit as well. The armored suit allowed him to breathe in this environment, and he raised his red saber, parried the strikes, the impact sending him drifting backwards. The mechanical limbs hissed as they adjusted to try to stabilize him, but Anakin was relentless on his path, adjusting his footing, leaping forward again, slashing in a flurry of powerful strikes. Each blow sent sparks into the void of space, dissipating like fleeting stars. Sidious retaliated with more speed, fueled by the darkness, cybernetic enhancements compensating for his ruined body. He reached out with the Force, beginning to hurl debris from the asteroid's fragmented surface at Anakin. Anakin twisted midair, narrowly avoiding the jagged rocks, and he planted his feet against a floating boulder, propelling himself back into the fray. The duel was a fight of adaptation, with both of them adjusting to the weightless environment, using every available object as leverage. Sidious attempted a downward slash, but Anakin sensed the attack, and he used the asteroid's gravity to his advantage, dodging in a slow, calculated backflip before pushing off the building and countering with a powerful kick, sending the Sith Lord hurtling through space. And as Anakin was taking a moment to begin catching his breath, things were escalating inside the Polis Massa facility, as Gungi stood protectively before Padme, green lightsaber ignited, waiting for any sort of attack. And the doors did eventually burst open, as 4 of Palpatine's Crimson Royal Guards stormed in, electrostaffs crackling to life. The Wookiee Jedi let out a deep, guttural growl before charging forward, saber cutting through the first staff in a shower of sparks. The second guard swung low, forcing Gungi to leap backwards. The third and the fourth one pressed in, overwhelming him with a coordinated strike. He barely parried in time, growls turning into sharp huffs of exertion. One of the staffs then connected with his shoulder, sending a painful jolt through Gungi's body, but he fought through it, pivoting, slashing upwards. Another guard fell, then another, and the final one attempted a desperate counterattack, but Gungi spun, saber a green blur as he sliced through their weapons, and he ended the fight as his helmet fell to the floor with the others. Gungi stood tall with the strength of Anakin's teachings beginning to flow through him. The guards were defeated, and Padme was still safe. Back outside, Sidious had recovered, and he now extended a clawed mechanical hand forward, trying to use the Force to defeat Anakin. And Anakin barely had time to react before the invisible Force gripped him, crushing the chest area on his spacesuit. The Sith Lord pulled him in, red blade poised for a killing strike, and Anakin's eyes burned with determination as he used his momentum to his advantage, twisting midair, severing Sidious's forearm from his suit. The Sith Lord shrieked. Voice was a garbled distortion through his mask, and with one arm disabled, his suit was now sparking, and he didn't know what to do as it was shutting down. Sidious attempted to retreat, kicking off the asteroid's surface to create any distance. He must get back to his ship, he must repair himself, wait for reinforcements. But Anakin was not letting him escape. He reached out with the Force, dragging the Sith Lord back towards him across the ground, and with a final decisive strike, he swung his blade to cleave through Sidious's mask. The Dark Lord spasmed, his suit failing him, limbs twitching as life support systems collapsed. He looked at Anakin in pure anger, as the air around him began to suffocate the life right out of Sidious. With a final shuddering gasp, his body went limp, drifting lifelessly now into the void of space. Anakin exhaled. He'd done it. He, the Chosen One, did destroy the Sith. Inside the facility, Anakin would re-enter, and Padme would soon give a safe birth to the twins, as Anakin nearly forgot all about his visions with the chaos of the last few days. Padme was safe, and so were Luke and Leia, as they knew it was time to get out of here before an Imperial fleet arrives as reinforcements. And with Sidious dead, Padme, Anakin, Bail, and Gungi would fly back to Coruscant, as Bail was able to begin reorganizing a coalition that was put together before Palpatine's rise to Emperor that would allow his death to be celebrated instead of causing any sort of panic. With Sidious dead, and the empire he sought to build collapsing before it could truly rise, Anakin actually turned his gaze towards the future of the Jedi. The galaxy was in disarray, Any loyalists to the Empire had to flee into the shadows, or they were arrested, as Palpatine was proven to be corrupt and the true leader of the Separatists, while the truth about the inhibitor chips controlling the clones to take out the Jedi would come out as well. While those who had resisted the tyranny of the new regime scrambled to rebuild what was lost, Anakin saw the opportunity. The Jedi had fallen, the Order was shattered by war and betrayal, and yet there were still survivors hiding away in the galaxy, waiting for a new leader to emerge. Determined to restore what had been taken from them, he set his sights on Tython, the ancient birthplace of the Jedi, where he would rekindle the light that was tried to extinguish. Upon arriving on Tython, Anakin and his first student, the Wookiee Jedi Gungi, stood before the ruins of temples that were long forgotten. The planet did pulse with the Force still, its deep valleys, towering mountains steeped in history. And here, he would not exactly replicate the old Jedi's failures, but he would begin to create something new while building on the older order. It was an order built on understanding, balance, strength, while respecting the older rigid traditions, but beginning to really bend these traditions. Survivors of the Jedi Purge answered Anakin's call from the Seeing Stone. Cal Kestis, Caleb Dume, and Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's now closest friend and former Padawan, would return to him and join his new order as a Jedi Knight, allowing Anakin to truly call himself a master for the first time. Together they did work to rebuild the foundations of the Jedi. Training halls were established, walls echoed once more with the hum of lightsabers, peaceful meditation, as Anakin would truly find the light. He would be visited by ghosts from the Force, first Qui-Gon, then Yoda, and even Obi-Wan was allowed into the Force Netherworld. There were echoes of others like Windu, Shaak-Ti, Plo Koon, and so many others through time and history. Anakin would teach his students the value of discipline, mastery of the lightsaber, but also emotion, not as a weakness, but as part of life that can be understood and controlled. And as time passed, the Order grew. Refugees seeking hope came to Tython, some with the potential to wield the Force, others looking for peace. Anakin watched as Gungi, Cal, Caleb, Ahsoka, and so many others trained the next generation. Padme was heavily involved in the restoration of the New Republic, and eventually Leia would become a Jedi, but Luke would pursue life outside of the Order, as that was his decision, as he enjoyed following in Padme's footsteps. As the Order grew and the galaxy shifted away from war, there would always be enemies in the shadows, but most notably the renegade Sith Lord Maul, who was building up his criminal army, but in time the new Jedi Order, led by Anakin and Ahsoka, would take down Maul's criminal empire, as the galaxy would once more see the Jedi as the heroes they were meant to be, rather than just lapdogs of the Senate, as Dooku painted them to be during the war. The galaxy was united after learning that the warring leaders, Dooku and Palpatine, had worked together, and the people wouldn't let their influence overtake them any longer, and so there was true peace for many years, as Grand Master Skywalker continued to oversee the growth of his new Jedi Order.